Good morning, everybody. Here we are in HD. Well, I think Simpiwe and I are in HD. I don't know about you, Ryan. All right.
Oh,
it
man.
is an official episode of the Gareth Cliff Show being performed, if you're going to call it performed, being recorded live and then turned into a podcast for your listening pleasure at any given time of the day or night. That's right. People get very upset. By the way, yesterday I received like an email from someone because the podcast was up like 1 minute late. I was like, come on, give us a chance. Please, 1 minute, it's not going to kill you. This person is furious.
We
But I
do
do
aim
love-
for good customer service, so that minute does matter, and we may or may not improve how fast we upload podcasts.
I know. People they have very high standards, and we've got to live up to those standards. Otherwise, why bother doing the show, right? I mean, if you've been on Instagram or on TikTok or on anywhere else, you would have seen some of the little video clips that Ryan churns out from the show. So
Yes.
then you know what he also does when he's not on the show every other couple of days. So a lot of people loving those because it gives you just a little insight into what we do, especially for those people who do not listen to the show every day, don't have the time, or maybe they're not that into us, whatever. They get to see just a little bit. Yeah, you know, it's enough for some people. It's like, yeah, that'll do. That'll be fine. That's
Just
plenty for me.
catch the highlights.
Yeah, there are so many things that you have to get through in a day, and for many people, I suppose we form part of their routine, which is terrific. I mean, I just love the fact that there are people who wake up with us the way we wake up with you. For some people, though, your time is just absolutely tiny. It's limited, and maybe you only have a very short commute. Maybe you have a very busy job where you have to concentrate the entire time, and you can't be listening to a podcast. Then you maybe have, 3 or 4 very short things that you listen to during the day. I pretty much whatever I'm doing, as long as it isn't meetings in front of people or actual creative work where I really have to focus on writing or putting together some kind of idea or whatever, then I'm listening to a podcast at the same time. So I probably have 3-4 hours in a day to listen to podcasts, which is a lot. And I love it. I get so much stimulation. I get so many ideas. I get to hear people from all over the world with their opinions and points of view. And I don't know how we managed before. Like, I met with somebody yesterday who runs like 4 radio stations in the country, right? And he used to be one of my bosses when I was at 5FM years ago. And he's running all these big radio stations now. And I said to him, "How's it going in radio?" Because I honestly haven't listened. And he was telling me it's like, yeah, people still love it. It's still the same. It's the same old, and they like it. If for some people it is good. It is what they want. It's crazy. I know.
Not for us.
Not
this target market.
but I get it. And I was explaining to him, well, we have a different kind of audience here. Forget about what content we do. It's the audience. We have people who they expect different things. We don't do commercial breaks. We take one break at the middle of the show so we can make a podcast out of the first hour. And we do, we bring sponsors on who we think might be interesting to our audience. Like a couple of weeks ago, we started with markets.com, and I know there are a bunch of people who are trying that out at the moment, which is amazing. Famously, we've had, Taylor Blinds, and we've had Revix, and we've had Collectomania with the SA Gold Coin Exchange. And we kind of build relationships with those people, Auto Trader. Yeah, I mean, these are Catalytic. These are businesses that I actually know about. I don't just advertise them for 30 seconds. A different sort of relationship with them, with the audience. And, you guys take part in that, which helps us to pay for producing what we do. It's just a totally different model. And radio, people just buy a bucket of commercials. That's what they do. They're just like, oh, well, give us 40 of those. So, I mean, it's a lot easier to do. And there's still plenty of money in radio by the sound of things, which is, I didn't know this. So it was good to catch up on that front. Anyway, listen, we got a lot to talk about. Speaking of podcasting, I mentioned on a podcast because Ben introduced me to this guy, and I didn't even know who he was. A guy called Andrew Tate. See, like that's exactly when, because this guy, he says a bunch of things that that people really don't like. Now, if you want to get my attention, then say stuff that you shouldn't say. I can't help it. I'm just, if there's a rebel in the room, then I'm going to want to talk to that rebel more than I'm going to want to talk to all the people who comply. But why did you go? Because what do you know about him? Because I didn't know him.
It's a hot topic at the office.
Yeah. What do you know about him, Piwe? Tell me from your point of view.
Well,
what do you know about him?
I've heard a few of his interviews, and I will say he said one or two things that I definitely do agree with. I'm like, okay, cool. And I also understand where he's coming from, where I'm like, okay, cool. This is where a lot of men kind of, I'd say, patriarchal thinking, this is how it kind of looks like. But then he says the most ridiculous things, and I'm just like, no, sir, this right here, we're not endorsing this in 2022. But he's recently been banned, I think, from Twitter, TikTok, on some of these social media platforms, and everyone is in a tiz. They're just like, why Andrew Tate? Why are we blocking Andrew Tate? What's going on there? And I'm just like, I'm kind of glad, because I was seeing him on my timeline everywhere. I could not get rid of that man. Like, even though I don't follow him, like, I've made a conscious decision not to follow him. He's still popping up, and all the crazy things that he say were popping up on my feed. So I'm sort of kind of glad that, I won't be seeing any of his content on my timeline.
What do you know about him, Ryan?
I've been watching him for a little while. There's opinions of his that I agree with. There's opinions of his that I don't agree with. I can hear some people sighing there.
Yeah.
And I've just been listening to him for a little while. He is everywhere. It's the business model of what he does with his Hustlers University, and that's why it's just become so viral. But there's been recent bans on him on Instagram and Facebook, Twitter, and now this weekend TikTok as well. So
I've heard altogether maybe about 3 or 4 hours of this guy, which is enough, I think. And that's not to say he's not very entertaining. He doesn't say things that are true. I mean, I think he said something about like how the world works and how there are these elites in the world who run everything, and they don't care about the rules, and the rest of us mere mortals have to follow the rules. And he says the only way you can stop following the rules is to make a lot of money, because then suddenly the rules don't apply to you, which is so true, because I've seen it happen. The whole way through COVID, we all saw it happen. And I thought that was a very interesting take. He's clearly a smart individual. He's got a very clear brain. And the thing that I think pisses so many people, including maybe you, Simpiwe, off, is he tends to be very dismissive of women, and he tends to stereotype and to simplify and to dumb down women to being like these really dumb creatures that are just there to sort things out for men, whether it's sex or making him a sandwich or whatever. It's like it is an old school way of looking at relationships. And I don't know that there are as many women who would be tolerant of that guy's opinions these days as there might have been, 50, 60, 70 years ago. But either way, it seems that he doesn't give a shit for opinions that are contrary to his when it comes to, the way women and men think. And I did think there was an interesting point. He makes a few of these, which is why I think I could probably listen to a little bit of him every couple of weeks, but not a lot. And his accent sort of bothers me. It's like halfway between American and like English. I'm not sure where well, yeah, he lives in Romania now, doesn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
As far as I know.
Yeah, I just don't like anyone being banned. I think when you ban someone, even if they're irritating and just divisive and maybe even hateful, like I just think you ban them, it's almost like you're going, nah, I can't hear you, but they're still there. I mean, it makes me think that the people who would ban somebody are the kind of people who would kill you if they could. They want to get rid of you so badly that if no one was looking and they had the right to kill you and they had the power to do it, they would. And that tells me more about the people who want to ban people than it tells me about the people who've been banned, And we spoke about like Trump derangement syndrome the other day with Sam Harris, and we spoke about how, he's been banned from social media. And I think you make these people more powerful when you ban them. It's almost like that scene in Star Wars where, Luke's watching and Darth Vader and Obi-Wan are fighting in the first Star Wars movie. And it's terrible special effects because this was 1977. And Obi-Wan says, "If you cut me down, I will be stronger than ever," or something to that effect. And that's exactly true. Like if you try to exercise the demon, then they become so much more powerful once they're outside of the containment of something like social media. Because then people are passing things around. He becomes an underground character. And he already was this major, major force on social media. I mean, he claims to be the most Googled man on the internet. I don't think that's true.
I don't think that's true.
I'm a fairly conscientious person. Like I'm always looking around to see what is going on in the world. I know more or less what's happening here and there. I mean, there's still stuff that I don't know. Don't get me wrong, but I'd never heard of him before 3 weeks ago.
But you know what's so funny is that I wasn't following this guy. He popped up one day, saw one interview of his, and then I could not get rid of him. Like he's been everywhere from TikTok to Instagram. And it's more other people like sharing his stuff or people will post. And it's just like, really? Like this man is everywhere. I can't escape this. And I think this is why I'm sort of kind of glad that he's blocked. Maybe I won't see his content anymore because I made the conscious decision not to follow him, but he's everywhere. He's literally everywhere.
Once you've watched something or listened to something, that algorithm just keeps feeding you that shit.
Not like Andrew Tate. Not like Andrew Tate was on some other level.
Maybe he knows maybe he knows the algorithm back to front. Maybe he's so clever that he can get himself served up to you like 10 times more than anyone else.
Don't you think it's also scary that all the digital platforms, like the digital town squares, like Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram, all like within one weekend banned him on all those platforms, which means there is some sort of communication or portal involved.
Oh yeah. No.
Which is kind of scary because they're feeding you. I mean, they must be in communication all the time then.
Oh yeah, those apps are listening all the time. Like TikTok basically knows everything about what you're doing.
They collude with each other.
They collude.
Oh.
Like the big banks in South Africa collude. There was that story in the news a couple of years ago about Big Bread. Who knew Big Bread? But Big Bread, where they colluded to keep the price of bread at a certain. All the different bread companies were all working to make bread the same price so that they could charge more and no one would undercut each other. I mean, it's a cartel, and I don't trust big tech as far as I could throw them. I'd rather have a guy like Andrew Tate putting out messaging which maybe makes some people uncomfortable. So what? That's a you problem. That's not a him problem. And frankly, there are probably a couple of things that he said about women that that maybe are true, that maybe women just don't want to hear. There are more people who are unhappy. There are more people who, despite having all the luxuries of modern living, like you've got warmth and running water and electricity, and there's food in the fridge. There's all of those things that most of the modern world has, right? And I'm talking about obviously not countries like Afghanistan, but any country like from South Africa all the way to Denmark, that actually life is really, really good for all of those people. And yet women are more unhappy than they've ever been. Now I've got to ask the question why. And it's not a question that any of us three can answer this morning, because we can't answer, even you, Simpy, on behalf of all women. But it's something worth thinking about. And perhaps that's also true for men, that despite all of the opportunities that modern living grants us, all the knowledge, all of the incredible chances that you have to travel and to see and to learn and to think, and the technology brings into your world, and people are more unhappy than ever. We've got to ask why, right? And that, I think, is such an interesting discussion, and it's not something, again, that we'll have a definitive answer for, because there's so many different things going on there. But part of it is that we have told ourselves a story sometimes. I mean, being unhappy, difference between expectation and reality. So if you're unhappy, you have a huge gap between the expectation and the reality. If you're happy, there's no gap between the expectation and reality. So you either have to bring your expectations down, or you have to make your life better. Those are the only two ways you can be happy.
Mhm.
If you get that, everything else falls into place. And I see so many people who, despite having like money and good looks and a job they can enjoy and all of this stuff, in other words, their life is really good. They have a good life, but they're desperately unhappy because their expectation is wildly out. And then you get those people who have, a reasonable expectation, but their life is just absolutely shitty. They've just got massive amounts of family stuff going on. They hate their job if they even have one. They are sick all the time. There are people whose lives are just really hard. And it doesn't matter what the expectation is, because happiness is going to elude them until they can sort out at least one of those problems and start to tackle them. So maybe this guy, this Andrew Tate, is just another one of those people who says things that are true that we don't really want to hear. And thank God there are people like that. They used to call them prophets or soothsayers or, augurers or whatever in the old days, because sometimes they'd be crazy. Sometimes they were crazy people. And they'd be standing on a street corner going, well, the 7-headed serpent will come and it will eat your children and the sky will go
And everybody
purple
laughed.
and it will rain blood. And everybody, well, some people laughed. Some people bought it hook, line, and sinker. And it's up to you to decide whether the stupid ones are the ones who bought it and maybe it came true or it didn't, or the ones who laughed. And usually, I would always say that usually the ones who are laughing are the better ones. I just like people who laugh. But anyway, all right. So Andrew Tate is banned from Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. So there's something going on there. There's something going on there. And also, the things that he was saying about how we're controlled. Ordinary people are controlled. They're not awake. They're not paying attention to the world around them. They're sitting on these devices and watching like people dancing and bullshit. And he said that's why so many people are poor and unhappy and miserable, and they don't get how the world works. When you say things like that, then if there is a conspiracy to keep us dumb and keep us distracted, then you better believe those people are going to switch you off, right? Anyway. Michael says, so now I have to go and see why he's banned because Gareth won't tell us why he's banned. Well, that's why we think he's banned. I've just given you.
We all don't know why.
There was a reason on the Washington Post. It was the same one that Trump got, saying that he's posting content that is inciting violence, threats.
Oh, please.
I go back to the why. Why?
But this is the thing.
Bullshit. I'm calling bullshit. First of all, the Washington Post is owned by Jeff Bezos, right?
You can't trust that man. Yes.
No, you can't. And this is not, again, people who buy all this mainstream media shit and eat it up, they are not going to listen to us now and go, oh, these guys are making a lot of sense. They're going to listen to us now and they're going to go, ooh, it sounds like a conspiracy theory. Jeff Bezos of Amazon owns the Washington Post. If he has a political point of view, and we know he does, he may even have political ambitions, then owning that newspaper means that newspaper is not an objective, reliable source. Sorry, that's just how it goes. So if the Washington Post publishes something, I always go, minus at least 60 to 70% of what's going on in there, especially editorial stuff, especially opinion. You know?
Yeah.
So know who owns these things. It's like in South Africa. If you read Independent Online, you know that Iqbal Serve, who is an absolute fraud and liar, owns and runs those newspapers. So every story that they put out, you have to look at with a skeptical eye. If you look at so many of the media businesses in this country, you need to know who owns the radio stations, what unions are involved there. I mean, today, supposedly, there's going to be a huge, nationwide shutdown. So if you can, I think it's in Pretoria only, but if you can stay off the roads, because who knows, around lunchtime, there's always going to be disruptions if there is a major national strike. And this is all that the unions know how to do. But anyway, find out which unions own shares in which companies, because that's another funny thing about this country. So you've got the unions, which are supposedly there to represent workers. But the guys and girls who run the unions are in charge of enormous amounts of money from union fees, which they then invest in the evil, in inverted commas, capitalist system. And they themselves become these, these big players, these mavens in the capital world. And they buy up companies and they sit on boards. And it's like the opposite of what a union should be doing. But this is how crooked the system is. So look at who owns what. See who's actually paying for the news. See who's on the board of these media companies. See which companies own the shares, the majority shares in these media companies, because that'll tell you straight away. Yeah, whether you can trust them or not. And I'm not trying to sound like some kind of crazy conspiracy theorist, because this is the truth. This is what's actually going on.
Yeah. Never actually thought of it like that.
Google and Facebook are listening to you mentioning his name and bringing his content. Maybe that's what it is too, but we talk about a lot of people on this show. So, not all of that gets served up to me. Who was that DJ you told us about the other day, Simpiwe?
Oh, Uncle Waffles.
Uncle Waffles. No, that hasn't come up on my... I'm going to say it right into my phone. Let's see if anything. Uncle Waffles. Let's see what happens there. But yeah, Giga is absolute collusion, i.e. big tech. Steph says, as a kid, I remember the most popular music was usually banned by the government. Yeah. And then Carl says, I didn't know there was a collusion in the bread industry. Oh, crumbs. Dun, dun. Being told the story is one thing. Buying into it is another. Absolutely.
Yeah. Andrew Tate actually, just before we came on here, he just dropped a final message to the world on YouTube on his brother's channel. It's a 1 hour sit down with him explaining everything, and I caught 10 minutes of it before we jumped on, but he's basically just saying,
so dramatic? My final message to the world.
It's titled the final message to the world. It's being banned everywhere.
Well, I mean, this is clever from him, because that will get a huge number of downloads. See, again, this is where these tech people are so dumb, and there's so much going on this week that we've got to talk about. We've only got a few minutes before we get to the headlines, so I'm sorry if I'm dominating the conversation this morning. But one of the things is that Anthony Fauci is resigning, right? Now,
oh, wow.
Yeah, he's 80-something years old, Simpiwe. I mean, he's an old fucking man. He was there. He was in the Nixon administration. Nixon was president so long ago, I wasn't even born.
Sure.
That's how old Anthony Fauci is. He was already a government bureaucrat when Richard Nixon, well, I'm not a crook, was president. So this guy is a perfect example of what we're talking about. Because, again, you remember how if you criticized anything that Fauci said, you were guilty of misinformation or disinformation, and you were banned. I mean, if you went against what the American Center for Disease Control, the CDC, said, or the NIH, if they said anything and you said the opposite, or you said, hey, I don't know if that's right, then you were banned immediately, like Andrew Tate's been banned today. So
Mhm.
big tech were like, oh, well, anyone who goes against Fauci, we're going to just shut them down. And they did that. So again, proving these guys cannot be trusted. And Anthony Fauci himself, he changed his position 3 or 4 times on masks. He's still going around, by the way, telling people now they should be wearing masks right now, which is the dumbest shit ever. Because if there's one thing we've learned out of COVID, it is that the masks did nothing. He also said that we must keep the kids out of school, even though we know it didn't affect kids. He also said that we had to go into lockdowns all over the world. And people took his advice very seriously because, he was the guy. And then it was all about him versus Trump eventually, which was so destructive because most people couldn't care less about whether it's him or Trump. We just wanted to know what the right thing was to make ourselves healthy and to keep ourselves healthy. But it became all about them. And this Anthony Fauci's got some opinion of himself, hey? I mean, you must hear he talks about himself in the third person. He has
Oh my God.
he has a portrait of himself in his office. He was in an interview. I swear to God, he was in an interview on like 60 Minutes I saw in 2020. And there was a portrait of him in his own office. Now, I mean, really, you get, it's fine if it's like some self-deprecating thing, but it wasn't. It was like this, like those dictators of these third world countries who have a picture of themselves in every government building, and you even see it in our police stations. There's a picture of Cyril. There's a picture of Becky Cele.
Which means nothing. It's just deco, guys. It's deco.
Now, it comes from Soviet Russia, where like they used to do that. Anyway, this Fauci, he's the perfect example because what we've discovered in the interim, and this is probably the real smoking gun, the worst thing about that man is that he may have had a hand in actually developing the coronavirus. Do you remember there was all of that stuff where they had congressional hearings and they asked him about what they call gain of function research, which is where you actually mess with a disease. You fiddle with the disease in order to give it more or different characteristics. And we know now, whether the Chinese will ever admit it or not, whether they'll ever give us evidence or not, it doesn't matter. We know that there's a huge likelihood, a massive probability, that the coronavirus, which caused all this shit all over the world over the last 2.5 years, was developed in a Chinese laboratory at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. We know that. We know that's where it came from. It didn't come from some wet market with bats and shit. We know that, right? That's pretty much defined as part of our history now. We will look back and we will go, oh, you mean the Chinese virus that was developed in Wuhan? That's what it is, no matter what they try to brand it as. And we know that the American CDC under Anthony Fauci funded some of that research. They paid for that to happen. So this guy is not to be trusted. And this is not a conspiracy theory, but if I had said this in 2020, gone, man. I would have been Andrew Tate. I would have been trusted. So again, big tech don't realize what they're doing here. Because as history unfolds, and as we discover that we were lied to by people like Fauci, what do? We don't go, oh, that's great, keep lying to us. We go, ooh, I can't trust these internet overlords of ours anymore. I can't believe when people say that person's banned or that's hate speech or that's inciting violence, which they say about anything these days. They say that about
that's the go-to reason.
You post a picture of someone who you think is unattractive, and they're like, "Oh, you're inciting violence against that person." Bullshit. So now we look at that, and I just don't think people trust them at all anymore. So they've damaged their credibility, not our credibility or our desire to find the truth. In fact, what they've done is forced us to look for truth elsewhere. Wow, that was a hell of a rant.
But that's true, Gareth.
I read something that he resigned 2 years early or something like that. I don't know. There was some headline I read about that yesterday. I don't know what that means though.
But
Well,
he's
no.
80 something, isn't he?
Well,
Like,
he's a very old man, but you know why? Because he's not the kind of guy who would have resigned voluntarily. He knows what's coming. Like the Republicans are going to win the midterm elections, and then they're going to call him into hearings and they're going to interrogate him, and he doesn't want that to happen. I think he knows that this whole gain of function research thing is going to be, that'll be his reputation forevermore. And I think he's trying to get out. He's trying to run and hide because he reckons if he resigns, they'll just forget about him. And he's hoping that.
Sure.
Otherwise, he's going to be the guy who we will always remember having pretended to be the one who helped us out of coronavirus, but actually was part of making it. You know? All right, so a bunch of other things we'll get to in a moment, but we've got some headlines that I want to pay attention to this morning, and then Simpiva's going to tell us what quiet quitting is, which is an actual thing. I cannot believe this is a thing, but it's a real thing that's happening, and it's unbelievable. I think there's already a word for this, but we'll see in a moment, because quiet quitting. This is what Gen Z and the millennials are on about right now in the job world.
it's actually
So
a big trending hoo-ha.
No, the fact that I even heard of it before you told me, and this is what I love, is like Ryan is going to tell us about Andrew Tate, but Simpiwe is going to go extremely to the other side. Tell us about what the wokest people in the world are doing. So, here's a sad story. Robert Sobukwe's son died at age 65 at his home in the Eastern Cape. Dedanziziwe Sobukwe was found unresponsive in the early hours of Sunday morning. He suffered for many years, starting when his father was arrested for his political beliefs all those years ago. The 65-year-old was alone when he died in his home in Graaff-Reinet in the Eastern Cape. In fact, I think Robert Sobukwe is buried in Graaff-Reinet too. We did a blind history episode on him, which I'd encourage you to go and listen to. It's really interesting. Robert Sobukwe was a fascinating man. He was the first president of the Pan-Africanist Congress. He was arrested back in 1960, and he was kept in complete isolation on Robben Island. And he, unlike all the others who were put in the prison together and actually could communicate with each other, at least a little bit, he was totally isolated. They considered him that dangerous. And unfortunately, his son, who I think is his only living descendant, died now. The family is saying they're awaiting the results of post-mortem to confirm cause of death. But, you know, again, we live in this country, everybody talks about our history and everybody talks about the struggle, but we don't look after anyone. This guy died on his own in his house in Graaff-Reinet, didn't have a lot of money, nobody cared. Now, only after he's dead do we hear a story about him. And I just think that's so sad, you know. Again, it's just this lip service that the politicians pay to the struggle. They're like, oh, Robert Sobukwe, our hero. But his son is sitting dying in a house in Graaff-Reinet and nobody seems to care. You know, again, politicians, can't trust them. You just can't trust them at all. So that's one of the stories that I wanted to bring you this morning. The other one is that Nicki Minaj and Lauryn Hill have managed to equal each other's chart record. Now, sometimes these stories are interesting, sometimes they're not, but I think this is a pretty big deal. After releasing 121 singles in 12 years, that's incredible, right?
That's
Nicki
a lot.
Minaj has set a new chart record in the US. The star's latest song called Super Freaky Girl has debuted at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, making her the first solo female rapper to achieve the feat in almost a quarter of a century. The last time that this happened was in 1998 when Lauryn Hill's Doo Wop entered the chart at number 1. So there we go.
Wow.
Well done to Nicki Minaj.
I don't even know that Nicki song, but well done to you, Nicki.
There we go.
Well done. Okay,
Now,
girl.
thanks to mentioning her name, you're going to get served up all of her videos on YouTube.
And music. Spotify is going to get you some people.
Now, this is quite scary. We talk about Eskom every day, and I'm sick of talking about them, but we can't pretend they're not there. So apparently, Eskom is considering disconnecting the city of Tshwane in order to secure an outstanding payment. The power utility said the city's in breach of the electricity supply agreement that it holds with Eskom because it failed to pay an amount of 1.6 billion rand. Which was last week. That's a lot of money.
How does this happen? What? Billion?
1.6 billion. So apparently, you see, again, I look at this story. This is from Eyewitness News. And I think Well, why didn't they ask for a comment from the city of Tshwane? Maybe they did, but it doesn't say here they had no comment. So it's almost like they're only taking what Eskom said and just printing it. Now, obviously, I live in the city of Tshwane, so they're not going to cut off the residents, but they'll cut off the city. In other words, they'll cut off municipal buildings, they'll cut off the mayor's office, all of that stuff. But if this is true, then why hasn't the city of Tshwane said anything? So Eskom's Daphne Mokoena said they've paid 68 million, which has done little to dent the massive outstanding balance on the city of Tshwane's electricity account. And also, when did they start racking up this huge debt? I mean,
Yes,
you
like
are
isn't
that's
this a monthly payment? You get a statement every end
right,
of the month. This is how. So how did we get to the billies? How did we get there?
right. And let's just remember what happens to you or me if we don't pay our bill. The
Yeah,
next
within
day,
like a week.
you're cut off. They don't give you months and months to think about it, right?
Eskom cut you off anyway.
Yeah.
And they did the load shedding.
But
Unbelievable.
this one, nah.
So there's Eskom news for the morning. We always need to have one of those. And then as if we didn't have enough of the tech overlords in our life, considering this is what we were talking about just now, Google Wallet has just launched in South Africa. And these are the banks and airlines that they have paired with. Okay, do you want to know?
Well, for all the Android users out there, you guys are finally catching
Yeah,
up, eh?
yeah,
Look at y'all. Ah.
I use my phone to pay for most things now. I haven't taken my credit card out of my wallet for ages.
Yeah.
So are you
Yeah,
using
right.
the same? Are
Apple
you also
Pay.
doing this?
Yes, we're all on the Apple Pay thing. All you need is your phone and you're good to go. Shout
Right.
out to Android users. You guys are finally catching up. That's so
Yeah.
cute.
So Android users can now use the Google Wallet to prevent fraud. You need to set up an authorization check-in to form a fingerprint, a face reading, or a PIN to process a payment. Google Wallet can be paired with 6 participating banks: First Rand, Absa, Nedbank, Standard Bank, Discovery Bank, and Investec. 4 international
Capitec.
airlines. No Capitec.
Yeah.
4 international airlines with regular services to and from South Africa have also partnered with Google Wallet on their launch. So all of that is happening right now. And the goal is to provide fast and secure access to all of your daily essentials, said Dong Min Kim, Google Wallet product manager. In the future, at some point, you can hopefully leave your home and you'll be able to take all your things you had with you that you would carry around in your pocket and store it all on your phone and access it seamlessly on the Android device.
Sure.
Yeah, and then you lose your phone and you can't get into your house.
Well,
you can't pay for anything.
That's what I was
That's the
thinking.
offside of it.
Also, I read an interesting fact the other day that South Africa is. I'm trying to word this properly. We can pay for more things using Apple Pay than most places in the US. How's that? We
quite
actually better
possible.
set up in South Africa
quite possible.
than the
You know,
entire of the US.
In the
I
US,
saw a
people,
TikTok chick talk
people
about
still
that.
pay. People still pay for stuff with checks in the US. A check, a written,
Yeah,
a handwritten
yeah.
check. I promise you.
I learned about that in school, but I've never ever used
Yeah,
or seen a
we-
check.
we also-
Like I've learned about it. I know the theory of what you're supposed to write on a check and how it's supposed to look like, but I've
No.
never used it in my
I used to
life.
practice filling it out and signing it off.
The last time I ever even saw a check was when I opened my first bank account. They gave me a checkbook, and I've never used it. I think it's still sitting in a cupboard somewhere. And I honestly, I don't think I've ever written a check for anybody. It's
It
amazing.
just shows how incredible our banking system is here in this country.
Yeah, it does. And we do have excellent banking systems, and we do have excellent banks. But again, they're very powerful. So, maybe they're charging us a little bit too much. Who knows? Because they'll all talk to each other and decide how much to charge us. And then we don't have an option. That's where some of these new banks like Time Bank or Capitec have come along and disrupted it a little bit. And good. They should. I think it's great. The more banks, the merrier. And there need to be a lot of these little ones as well. So we can decide for ourselves who we want to go to, right? Anyway, tap and pay is what people are calling it. I saw an ad yesterday, says Case, where the company actually still had a fax number
Wow.
Wow. Facts. Eh? Facts.
Even just saying facts, you can hear the oldness
Yeah.
in that
I can
facts
still
number.
picture it being that like old color, that like cream color.
Dark times, y'all. Dark times.
And Dogoza says, now people can't show off the color of their cards at the club.
That's true.
That's a good
That's
point.
true.
Because now they're
But
just
they're going
paying
to be
with their
showing off their
phones.
phones. No. There's a different flex now. You're taking out
No.
your phone.
No,
now
but-
you're taking out the iPhone, whatever. You're taking out your Android. Hey, guys, it's a different flex. No. Don't worry. It's like car
But some
keys.
period, didn't you notice with Capitec, when they came out, they brought out the black bank card for standard users? And that was
Yeah, and everyone is
actually
mad.
one of the main attractions to going to Capitec Bank, was that you got a black debit card without needing, an FNB private account or whatever.
Yeah, but also people with Capitec, we don't take them too seriously. But also people were mad. They were like, like there's levels to this thing. And I'm just saying, guys.
Do we not take
just
people
saying.
with Capitec seriously?
Wow.
No, we can't. There's only like 2 ATMs in this entire country. And when it's payday, you're going to wait in a line that's going to take 3 hours.
Like the
before
post office.
Capitec people, no. Mm-mm.
So I want to talk about this because I bought this new cover a while ago. I've probably had this for about 3 or 4 months now. But it's one of those sort of rubberized covers, right? Because I don't want to drop my phone and then have to pay thousands and thousands of rands to fix the thing, or have to get a new one. So I put this cover on. But this cover is one of those ones that it doesn't go into your pocket easily. So it kind of sticks.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's like it doesn't slide. It
gets
sticks
caught halfway.
Right.
As you're putting it in.
Whether I'm wearing jeans or whether I'm wearing any other kind of pants, and I would normally put my phone in my pocket. Now it just doesn't go in properly. I have to like open the pocket with the other hand, and then when I pull it out, it pulls out the pocket with it. I know this is very much a first world problem. It's not the worst thing that's ever happened to me, but it's annoying. So I think I'm going to get a new phone cover. I have to. It's not worth this kind of frustration on a daily basis.
Yeah, no, you definitely need a new phone cover. Like all that taking. No. If there's one thing a cover should.
So Pewa's had a new phone for like 2 months now, and she still doesn't have a cover. But she used to pester James and I for not having.
No, wait.
Having covers
right?
back
No,
then.
I do have a cover. I just have the wrong size, so I just need to have the time to go get the right cover.
You get the wrong size, but you get a brand new phone.
You're gonna drop it some Pewa.
This is not about me, right now.
expensive.
Let's help Gareth vent about his cover.
It's not worth venting. But let's talk about this for a second. So, what is quiet quitting? And you explain it, because I read an article about this yesterday, and I could not believe this is a thing. Okay, so quiet quitting. Here it is, brought to you by Simpiwe Mthethwa.
So it might not be what you think it is. It's basically employees, mostly millennials, saying that they're going to do the bare minimum at the office. So if they work a 9 to 5, they will arrive at the office at 9 o'clock and they will close their laptops at 5 o'clock. They will not go above and beyond. So that means they will not reply to emails during the weekend. They will not do work when they get home. They are literally doing what they are paid to do, nothing more, nothing less, bare minimum. And it's gotten a whole lot of people talking. I saw a couple of things on LinkedIn about people talking about quiet quitting, and is this healthy? Is this not healthy? Is this like basically employees setting up healthy boundaries in the workplace? And is this something we should kind of look at to say, is this a bad thing and is it not? And I just think it's very interesting. Quiet quitting.
Well, if you do the bare minimum at work, and we've all had days where we've done the bare minimum, right? Everybody has. Let's just admit that up front. No one is the perfect employee or employer. Nobody ever does everything and some on every day. There are some days where you feel really productive. You get a lot done. But it's always the people who do more work, who go beyond the job description, who deliver way more than they promise, that get ahead in life, and that usually are happy. and that usually have some feeling of achievement and purpose. You know, there's nothing better. Honestly, there's nothing better than getting home after a busy day and feeling like you've achieved a lot. For me, anyway, I think this is just laziness. I think this is just another word for lazy.
When
Why
I was
As
in,
someone who's
in primary
quite
school.
young, I
Yeah.
would say that it is. I think it. I mean, I'm not all about this hustle culture, like sleep when you're dead. That's
Yeah.
not me. But I definitely think that in order for you to achieve the success that you'd like to achieve, you need to put in the work. And the work is not 9 to 5. Sometimes it comes with you at 6 o'clock, at 8 o'clock. It's going the extra mile when you need to. I think there is a balance that people need to have. You don't always need to work until 10 o'clock. But I definitely think if that's the time, I mean, if there's a big campaign coming into the office, imagine, and I'm like, well, I'm leaving at 5, y'all. You'll see yourself, even though the work is not done. It
Yeah, if
kind
the
of is
work is
like,
done, I mean, you
come
know
on.
how we work, right, Simpiwe? I mean, we don't make you fill in timesheets or any of that shit, because if you've done your work, you can have an
Yeah.
early day or a late. If you want to stay at the office and do more, you can do more. I mean, there's I think we've got a nice culture at Cliff Central, so I really can't compare it to other
Yeah.
places. But if I had a regular office job and I was pen pushing and doing spreadsheets and filling in forms, and if I was at Home Affairs, you better believe I'd be a quiet quitter. So as much as I say like it's lazy, and it is, and I think this is a great definition here too. Congo Chris says quiet quitting is basically a way for people to feel good about having no ambition. If you don't want a promotion or a raise, just quiet quit. I think that's right.
But it's also
Even in
dangerous.
even in a
I think
place like
it's,
Home Affairs, you know.
yeah, because what happens is, and we've seen it, take Home Affairs, for example, firstly, we all know it's going to take the whole day for you to just go in and out. But we've
Mhm.
seen how, like, they won't even try, like, if you come there and you're like, hey, here are my paper, and they're like, well, I can't help you because you got the wrong thing. They're not even trying to assist you in terms of explain what you did wrong, or, hey, the form that you're supposed to get is from this. No, they just let you go and be a headless chicken in this place. So I think for me, that's where the problem is that just going just a bit sometimes, it actually helps. I mean, imagine you get to Checkers and they don't even smile at you. And that for me is like going just a
Yeah.
bit above and beyond what you pay to do. And now we get to the
Well, we've got a lot of varying opinions here. I mean, like, people are on both sides of this argument. I want to hear what you think also, Ryan. But Super Jacob Zuma says, I just want to work my limited time on Earth away and make profits for companies. Why does everyone hate on my choices? You see, I think that's sarcastic, but I get the point. It's like, why would you, when you look back on your life, have you ever walked past a tombstone and seen he really loved his 9 to 5. He was there every day on time and left at the last moment and always filled in all of his forms. And he hardly ever took leave. No,
No.
it says on a tombstone, it usually says father, brother, sister, uncle, wife. Those are the kinds of things it says. It says nothing. In very rare circumstances, if someone had an exceptional career, it'll say something about their career, but usually not.
True.
So I'm kind of torn on this one, I have to say, because a part of me, it does just think that, a lot of younger people are just lazy as shit. Not all, obviously, but a lot of them are just lazy, and they think work is like a punishment, whereas work is your place to prove that you can have value in society. Work is one of the areas where you can actually make a contribution to other people, not just to yourself the whole time, and to yourself, because you can earn money and then do the things that you really want to do. I mean, work can be a very noble thing to put your heart and soul into, provided you're creating something that is valuable and that adds something to the world that wasn't there before. Then you should feel good about work. But if you really hate it and it is just drudgery, then I reckon do the minimum. Not every job is stimulating, right? What do you think, Ryan?
I remember in primary school, I remember in grade 6, I don't know why, significantly this day, but we were taught about different forms of protest. And this was actually a form of protest. They called it a work to rule, if I remember correctly. It was
Really?
doing exactly what you need to do. As soon as 5 o'clock comes, you go home. It was a form of protest. It was never, and that's what I was taught in primary school. And so when I hear about this quiet quitting, I don't see it as a trend. It's, for me, I was just taught that it's a form of protest in some sort of workplace.
Although if you're still doing, even if it is the bare minimum, as long as you're doing the minimum, for many people, that's enough to keep them in the job, right? They're not going to be fired. As long as you're ticking off those basic things. And remember, most big corporations, they have these performance reviews where they sit people down and they're like, all right, well, let's look at your job description and let's see how many of the things you do and how many things you don't. And so they do that regularly. These performance reviews are like terrifying to some people. But if you're doing the minimum, you won't necessarily get fired, but you also won't get promoted. How's anyone going to notice that you have any?
But also isn't there a bit of a danger in it when you think of like the long-term effects of it? Because now you have basically, let's say, 10 employees that haven't really done much to say that they're capable of moving into a promotion, so a more highly functioning position, but also the company is not necessarily moving towards whatever's happening in the world. And now you kind of have the stagnation that's going on and everyone gets impacted, even the guy that's kind of overperforming. Like, I'm just thinking about the long-term effects of this. It's like, it's all great. Like, I'm all for a healthy work culture, but at the same time, there's going to be days and weeks where you might have to put in that extra time. And then you don't do it because why? No, you only pay me for 9 to 5. You don't pay me for the 7 to 8 o'clock. So now we've lost out on potential work, or we couldn't get. You see, that's my issue now. It's like now we're not progressing, and now you're still mad because you get paid 5,000, but you haven't done anything to get paid 10,000.
Yeah. Well, let's also accept that some jobs are just really not very stimulating. Some jobs are just shit. Imagine you're like, I often think of security guards who sit at the gate of a office park or whatever. I think that's got to be just so. I mean, sure, on those rare occasions when you actually are required to be a security guard and like someone's trying to break in or whatever, that's when your job counts. But for hours and hours and hours and hours every other day, you're just sitting there. And there's nothing. How stimulating could that possibly ever be?
And some of them even just have a smile on their face every day.
I know. No, I think that's
think that is going above and beyond. You know what I mean? Like, it might not be a tangible you going above and beyond, but I think that's what, sometimes you're looking, you're like, I don't need to smile, I don't need to be nice, but I am nice to the customers, or the petrol attendants when they wash your windows. They don't have to do that. It's they're honest, but it makes that experience so much more better. And then you come back and then you're like, hey, this was great. So I think even in jobs where you think it's not stimulating, you can still make the most of it and still give 10% when required. I don't think it needs to be an everyday thing. I really don't. But when required, when push comes to shove, we kind of know that we can rely on you to go the extra mile without us having to say, so we'll give you, because I think it will benefit you in the long run of things.
And also, you make your decisions. Like if you don't want to have a lot of stress, or you don't feel like being very creative and you just want a salary, then obviously you can go work for a government department or whatever. You can be a number in the machine. And then you'll check in. Nobody really knows what you do. If you don't get bored easily, or maybe you just listen to podcasts all day. I don't know. There's some people who could do that. And then when you die, no one's going to remember that you even existed. But for you, as long as you got your money to buy whatever it was that you wanted to eat and to do the basic things that made you happy, cool. I'm not going to argue with you on that front. But I think most of us want a little more from life. And this quiet quitting, it bothers me that we're trying to find new terms for old things as well. I mean, we already know what this is called. We know what these people have always existed. These quiet quitters. I don't think that this is anything new. I think that's where you make a good point, Ryan. All right. I see here in the financial services industry, says Thurence, Quiet quitting is not allowed. There's a thing called performance appraisals, grinding blood out of a stone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there are horrible, horrible employers, right? There are horrible people who just make everyone's life a misery, and when no one wants to work, and that's no good either. Deolinda says, how many companies expect you to put all of your extra time, and years later, you're still waiting for your promotion? That also happens. Nobody said
Yeah.
it was fair. Nobody said that,
Mm.
in every job, everywhere, there's going to be someone who notices talent and an opportunity and possibility and pushes you up. Sometimes you could work for a company your whole life and they just don't even notice you. That would be so
Mhm.
soul destroying. And Dogoza says promotions are overrated anyway. Sounds like more work to me. Well, this is another thing, right? Like if you prove
Yeah.
that you're really, let's say you go above and beyond, you do way more than is required. The
Mhm.
problem is then you get given more to do because people know you can
Yes.
do it. They can trust you to get it done. That's another big problem. I've
Yeah, what's that famous saying? If you want something done, give it to a busy person. Like, there's truth in that.
That's right.
There's truth
Yep.
in that. So,
Well, we're already out of time for the first hour of this morning's show. In the next hour, I will be introducing you to none other than Larry Elder, who is someone who's making massive waves in America. I'm excited to bring you an exclusive interview with him, which we'll be playing for the first time right here live on the show. And you can listen to it live this morning between 7 and 8, or you can download it after 8 o'clock this morning. Let's see what Larry Elder's got to say. That's coming up next.
This week on the Auto Trader podcast.
When I've heard people talk about motorsport in South Africa, it's so expensive to get into, and you can't compete internationally, and all the negative stuff. And what you're saying is that's actually not the case.
I don't think that's the case. The activity's there. And if you want to go motor racing, start in the karts. If you're of a certain age, get a hatch and go and start racing club racing, or get a BMW which is not too expensive and not expensive to run, and join the BMW Racing Series. Great way to start.
Catch us every Monday at 9 a.m. on YouTube and on autotrader.co.za.
Right. It is Wednesday morning, the 24th of August, and just after 7 o'clock, time for us to get to Larry Elder. Now, I mentioned before, Larry Elder is an incredible guy. He's a talk show host. He's a political commentator, Black conservative voice in America. And in a conversation that I recorded with him just the other day, we spoke about all the things, race in America. We spoke about Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. We spoke about the conservative movement. We also spoke about California, where he's done a bunch of things, including take on the governor of California. He came up second in the vote to try and replace Gavin Newsom as governor of California, but he has even more political ambitions, and you'll hear about them here first on cliffcentral.com this morning. Please meet and get into a discussion with me and Larry Elder. Yep, and have an excellent Wednesday. We will see you on tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock live, but don't miss any of this. This is the first time you'll get to hear Larry Elder, and you can listen to it right now. And tell us what you think in the comments. I want to welcome to the show today somebody who I follow as a regular source of proper information and the kind of person who makes sense of some things that don't seem to make a lot of sense these days. He is an American conservative. He is what he describes as himself a small L libertarian. He's a talk show host, an author, a politician, an attorney, also someone who's produced a great documentary. The last time I spoke to him was on my TV show, where we did a year's worth of programs, and Larry was one of the most popular guests we had on then. I welcome him again, knowing that whatever he's going to say to us today is probably going to be the kind of thing that you will remember for a very long time going into this crazy election year in the United States. He is none other than Larry Elder. Larry, it's so good to see you. How are you?
Mr. Cliff, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, it's always good to see you, and I'm glad to see that you're thriving. In fact, everywhere I look at the moment, I'm seeing even mainstream media outlets are starting to make good use of your experience and wisdom to try and understand the craziness of this, as I said, election year, but also this pretty bizarre presidency that the whole world is feeling the bad decision making of. Joe Biden's been president now for almost 2 years, and 1.5, almost 2 years, and he's just, I don't even know if he knows that he's president at this stage.
Well, he's the reason he's president, Gareth, is because Bernie Sanders won what was called the Nevada caucuses during the campaign for 2020. And for one brief shining moment, a self-described Democrat socialist was the party's frontrunner. They were scared bleepless. Everybody coalesced behind Joe Biden because they thought that he would at least be a moderate who would turn down the temperature regarding Donald Trump. It would not be incompetent. And they figured he was old and dottery and he wouldn't last till 2024. And then they'd move in Kamala Harris. That was the game plan.
Now, moving in Kamala Harris, I mean, this is interesting too, because it would be fine if you had a president who is maybe, struggling a little. I mean, Franklin Delano Roosevelt wasn't exactly all there in the last few months of his presidency. It was a tough time for him too. He had health concerns and all sorts of other things. There have been other presidents who've had to call in their vice president. I mean, famously, when Richard Nixon went, there was a crisis and Gerald Ford was brought in. But Kamala Harris, if she had to take over, would almost make things worse.
You're right, but it doesn't really matter. You see, blacks are the most loyal part of the Democratic base, and black women even more loyal than the men. And while Kamala Harris has lower poll numbers than Joe Biden does nationwide, she's polling close to the 70% rate among blacks. And I'm not seeing it broken down by gender, but I'm sure with black females, she's around 75%. That's relevant because in the early primaries like Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, black voters are 50% or more of the Democratic voters in the primary. And if black females perceive Kamala Harris to have been drop-kicked in favor of somebody else, especially in favor of a white male like Gavin Newsom or Mayor Pete Buttigieg, they will not vote Republican. They simply won't vote. So they are stuck with her. The only way they get rid of Kamala Harris is if Kamala Harris says, you know what, I'm vacuous, I'm incompetent, I did a terrible job as vice president, I want to leave. She's not going to do that. She wants to be president. She ran for the presidency. She didn't do very well, dropped out early, but she wanted to be president. So the only way Kamala Harris goes is if she says, I want to go. She's not going to do it. No matter what they say, no matter what the media says, Gareth, I promise you, if Biden is not the nominee in 2024, Kamala Harris will be.
Well, is that good news for Republicans? But before we get to the answer to that, and you being a self-confessed Republican, you've been called many worse things than that by the media. But let's just talk for a minute about something you said just now. You said black voters are very loyal, and black female voters more than any other group in America.
Right.
Why do you think that is? And how has it been that the Democratic Party has been able to rely reliably on black voters and black female voters in particular when they've done so little to deliver for them?
Well, let me answer your latter part first. The reason the Democratic Party has been successful in convincing black people to vote for them is that they've been successful in convincing black people that systemic racism remains a major problem in America, and these dastardly people over there, also known as Republicans, are in the way of fighting for social justice. They've tailored the history of the Democratic Party to exclude the fact that they were the party of slavery, the party of Jim Crow, and they've convinced Democrats that the policies of the policy of the Democratic Party will advance the interests of Black America. Never mind, as you pointed out, the horrible consequences of these policies, not least of which has been the so-called war on poverty that was launched by a Democrat in the mid-'60s. At the time, 25% of Blacks entered the world without a father married to the mother. Today, fast forward, 70% of Blacks enter the world without a father married to the mother. And Barack Obama said a kid raised without a father is 5 times more likely to be poor and commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in jail. Now, the question is, how do they go from having 25% of Black kids born outside of wedlock in 65 to 70% today? The answer is the welfare state. The welfare state has incentivized women to marry the government and incentivized men to abandon their financial and moral responsibility. And the Democratic Party has convinced Black people that this is not really a problem. The only problem really is systemic racism, enduring racism, foundational racism. Choose your favorite adjective. And that's the magic dust, the pixie dust that they've thrown in the faces of Black America. And that's why I've done these 2 documentaries, Uncle Tom 1, which came out in 2020, and Uncle Tom 2, which comes out on August the 26th, to talk about the fact that after slavery, Gareth, when we're talking about almost 100% illiteracy, horrific racism, Jim Crow, KKK, Black people still move forward. In 1940, 87% of Blacks lived below the poverty line. 40 years later, that number had reduced to 47%. That's a 40-point drop in 20 years, the biggest 20-year period of economic growth in the history of Black America. And that was before all the Civil Rights Act legislation of the mid-'60s, before the Supreme Court ruled that you cannot outlaw interracial marriage, even before the so-called Brown versus Board of Education that struck down separate but equal. They still move forward. Why? Families, belief in entrepreneurship, and belief in God. Fast forward, Uncle Tom 2 talks about the parade now being led by people like Black Lives Matter. 85% of Black people support the Black Lives Matter movement, even though it was founded by self-described trained Marxists. And as you well know, Marx wanted to, quote, dethrone God, which was the pillar of Black progress following slavery. He's anti-private property, which means he's anti-entrepreneurship. And on their website, they talked about their opposition to the nuclear intact family. So the pillars, the family, God, entrepreneurship that made Black America grow in the face of horrific racism is now being touted as bad things by organizations like Black Lives Matter.
Larry, I'm always very careful to not force anybody to answer on behalf of their race. Unfortunately, this seems to happen to Black people far more than it happens to white people. Anytime you say anything as a Black man, then it stands to reason that you're speaking on behalf of a community. Whereas very few people, when they ask a white person that, assume that he or she is talking about the entire white community, whatever that might be. And, there are Black people with different opinions. There are white people with different opinions. You probably have more in common with me in terms of our political ideology, or perhaps our leaning, than maybe I have with another white person in Los Angeles. Right. The fact is, though, that a lot of these things that you've just said they seem to be problems which are not going away. A 70% fatherlessness, the huge recidivism, the amount of kind of low social economic status that so many Black people in America have to endure. A lot of these problems, if you don't interrogate them, it does look like it's the system. The irony seems to be that they want to use the system, and I say they, I mean the Democrats here, not Black people, but it seems that they're promising to fix something which the system has obviously messed up, according to that narrative, by using the system again. which is counterintuitive. How do we fix these problems? And if you had to suddenly be president, how would you tackle the problems that Black people face without, again, speaking on behalf of all Black people?
Well, Gareth, have no fear that most Black people do not think that Larry Elder speaks for most Black people. During my campaign for governor, I was called the black face of white supremacy by a Black LA Times columnist. Another one said that my views were white supremacist. So believe me, most Black people don't think Larry Elder speaks for Black people. How do you solve these problems? You tell the truth. The route to leave poverty is just a handful of steps. Number one, finish high school. Ideally one where you can read, write, and compute at grade level. We have a 50% dropout rate in many of our urban high schools, and in the city of Baltimore, which is majority Black, there are 13 public high schools, 13 in the inner city, where 0% of Blacks can do math at grade level, and another 6 where only 1% can. So we have a massive, massive problem with our urban education, which can be solved through school choice. Let parents choose the school, let the money follow the child rather than the other way around. The other big problem, of course, is crime. And all of this is because of not having a father in the house. So no matter how badly you are dealt your hand, it is your obligation, your duty to pick those cards up and play them to the best of your ability. Life is still all about choices. And this is still America, where people in Cuba are braving shark-infested waters to get here. People from Haiti are coming up here, Central America, South America. Why? Because America is systemically racist? Nonsense, because it is a place where if you bust your butt, work hard, stay focused, you can make it. And that is the message that people need to be telling Black kids in America all over, as opposed to you are a victim. You are a victim of enduring racism, which is what I think one of the Democratic candidates said. One of the other ones called it foundational racism. Nonsense. In 1940, one of my close friends is the great Thomas Sowell, who's still with us. He's in the mid-90s. He was described by David Mamet as America's greatest living philosopher. Black man, written about 40 books. He's an economist. He tells me in the 1940s, when he grew up in East Harlem, the all-Black schools were competitive with the all-Irish schools and the all-Italian schools that were on the Lower East Side. They didn't have this big academic gap because people cared about education and fathers were in the home and they encouraged kids to go to school. That has all changed because, as I said, of the welfare state and the large number of Black kids who enter the world without a father married to the mother. Until and unless we start talking about the 800-pound elephant in the room, and often Republicans don't even talk about this, nothing is going to change.
I'm so glad you brought up Thomas Sowell, because I have a number of his books here, and this man was way ahead of his time. And, you know, I think about it often. Some of the people who are the leading minds in America that I look to, Thomas Sowell among them, Neil deGrasse Tyson, who's probably one of the foremost, if not the number one physicist alive in the world today. You know, there are some great people here, and I don't really think that any of them are doing too badly if you are going to say, you know, how are they doing representing Black people. But then it seems to me that there are some Black people in America who just have been crowned, whether or not that's by intention or by their own wily political behavior. But, you know, if I look at Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson, both of whom have come to South Africa on a number of occasions, they're always the guys who come out and speak on behalf of, which you claim not to. I'm going to reiterate so that people don't get this wrong. How is it that those two guys who really have traded on this whole systemic racism thing for the longest time, and in some ways try to characterize themselves as the heirs to the Martin Luther Kings and, you know, the great civil rights leaders of that era, even if they're not, how is it that they manage to be the people, the go-to people that the media always end up talking to whenever there's an issue of racial nature, whenever there's something that happens to someone in a Black community, whenever there's a police shooting or anything like that? Why is it Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson?
Well, one of my good friends is Walter Williams. He's also an economist and a close friend of Thomas Sowell. Walter Williams just died a year ago. He refers to them as race-hustling poverty pimps. He believes that they have co-opted the civil rights movement and gone from demanding equal rights to demanding equal results. Interestingly, about Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson grew up in South Carolina, and his mother was a teenager who got impregnated by the married man who lived next door. So Jesse Jackson grew up without a father in the house, and he was taunted. Jesse ain't got no daddy. Jesse ain't got no daddy. Clearly, it wounded him. Al Sharpton had a nice middle-class life until his father ran away with another woman, and down to the hood he went. The reason I mention that is neither of these men had a good relationship with their own fathers, but they rarely talk about that, and which is the number one problem facing Black America. They talk about racism, 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 when racism has never been a less significant problem in America. Barack Obama won with a greater percentage of the white vote than his predecessor, John Kerry, did 4 years earlier. And while Barack Obama only got 52% of the vote, when he walked into the Oval Office the third week of January 2009, Gareth, he had 70% approval. A whole bunch of people who didn't vote for him nevertheless wanted him to succeed. Why? Because they thought he was going to be a racial reconciliator. And you look at the polls when he came into office, the majority of whites, majority of blacks both thought that race relations would improve. When he left, majority of whites and blacks thought race relations got worse, because every time Obama had a chance to be the racial reconciliator that a lot of people hired him to be, he picked up the race card and he played it. The Cambridge police acted stupidly. If I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon. There's a place called Ferguson, even though Ferguson was alive. America has racism in its DNA. And he invited who I consider to be one of the preeminent race hustlers in America, Al Sharpton, to the White House over 70 times. There's even a picture of Barack Obama as a senator next to a smiling Louis Farrakhan, who's America's preeminent anti-Semite. So Barack Obama talked the talk about racial conciliation, but he governed, frankly, as somebody who divided us and played the race card time and time and time again. Why? Not because he truly believed racism was a major problem in America. I believe, Gareth, if he and I were in the room together, we'd be completing each other's sentences about racism. But he understood that in order to get elected, you have to convince 13% of the population, which are blacks, to vote 90 or 95% for the Democratic Party. The only way to do that is to tell black people that they are victims. That's what he's done, and I find it absolutely repulsive.
Isn't it also really condescending and patronizing? And doesn't it make you think that at some point, the average Black American, whoever that he or she may be, is going to get a little annoyed by being spoken down to like this and being counted without actually being asked what their opinion is on something, just because they vote in a loyal direction?
And I think you're right. It is condescending, especially for somebody like Barack Obama. Led a charmed life, went to the finest prep school in Hawaii, went to Columbia for undergraduate, Ivy League, Harvard graduate for law school, becomes the first black president of the Harvard Law Review, teaches at University of Chicago School of Law, becomes a senator, becomes president. He's had a wonderful, wonderful life, which shows you what can happen if you work hard, you stay focused, and you have a vision. As to if blacks are going to wake up, I think it's beginning to happen slowly but surely. In 2008, when Barack Obama won, Republicans only got 4% of the black vote. 2012, when he ran for re-election, by the way, governed over the worst economic recovery in American history. Between 2010 and 2013, Black America lost 1/3 of their net worth because of the recession. And then in 2016, when Donald Trump ran the first time, blacks voted 8% for the Republican Party. He delivered the greatest economic economy for blacks ever. He pardoned the first black heavyweight champion, Jack Johnson, a 15-year effort led by Ken Burns, the documentarian. Even Obama didn't pardon him. George W. Bush didn't pardon him. Trump did. Trump also did something about the borders. The reason that's important for blacks is because most of the people coming to the country illegally on our southern border are unskilled, and therefore they compete for jobs against unskilled blacks living in the inner city and put downward pressure on their wages. Trump also supports school choice, as I do. He also supports something called opportunity zones that lower taxes and regulations in the inner city to create jobs for black people. He put funding for black colleges on a permanent basis for 10 years, the only person to do that. He also passed something called the First Step Act, which allowed prisoners, most of them were black men, to have their long sentences reconsidered. And the average black man had his sentence reduced around 70 months, about 5,000 of them did. So Trump did all of that. And when he ran for re-election, he got 12% of the black vote and 20% of the black male vote. So it's going in the, quote, wrong direction for Democrats. And as a result, they're doubling down on calling America systemically racist and doubling down on referring to Republicans and to Trump as bigots.
You know, you said something just now which is going to bristle with a lot of people, the idea that race relations have actually never been better in some ways, and that certainly the case for Black Americans has probably never been better than it was under Trump. Of course, this upsets a lot of people on the left, and you hear the immediate retorts. So I've got to be the devil's advocate and say, oh, but there is a lot of racism. This is, and you know, to a lot of people on the left, it seems that either you are saying that there's no racism, which you haven't said,
Right.
and which I can't remember anyone in the Republican Party ever saying that there's no such thing as racism, or it's all been extinguished and racism is dead. Nobody's ever said that, but that seems to be the argument. How do you refute that when people on college campuses say this to you?
Well, and they do. I often get a question when I have the Q&A at a college. Mr. Ellie, now you say there's no racism in America. I said, whoa, hold the phone. $100,000 to your favorite charities in the bank right now, if you can find when Larry Elder either said or wrote, there's no racism in America. And the $100,000 is still earning interest, Gareth. I would say two things. What people talk about are opportunities, and they talk about police brutality. There was a magazine called policemag.com, and self-described very liberal people were asked, how many unarmed blacks did the police kill in 2019? And half of the self-described very liberal people said that 1,000 unarmed black men were killed by the police in 2019. 8% thought 10,000 unarmed blacks were killed in 2019. What you asked, do regular liberals think? Well, 39% of regular liberals thought that the police killed 1,000 unarmed black men in 2019, and 5% thought they killed 10,000. The answer is, according to the Washington Post database, 12. And in fact, the police killed twice as many unarmed white men as black men. If anything, the studies show the police are more hesitant, more reluctant to pull the trigger on a black suspect than a white suspect. Now, this is broadly unknown both in the black community and the white community. It is a lie that the police are engaging in police brutality. Are there bad cops like Derek Chauvin? Absolutely, but you deal with them on a case-by-case basis. Even the black prosecutor, the lead prosecutor in prosecuting Derek Chauvin, never said that what Derek Chauvin did had to do with George Floyd's race. And he was very careful in his opening statement to say, the Minneapolis Police Department is not on trial. All cops are not on trial. This individual is on trial. So we need to deal with these things on a case-by-case basis. Regarding opportunity, think about this. There was a study that showed a black person with a certain set of grades and a certain SAT compared to a white person, same grades, same SAT, had a much higher chance of getting into the college or university of his or her choice. So it's easier for a black person to get into a college or university. Every single Fortune 500 company has a outreach program or a diversity program or some sort of program to make sure that their workforce is diverse because they feel it makes sense to recruit a good staff and it makes sense for marketing purposes. Racism is very expensive to practice, and those who practice it very much end up being hurt in the marketplace. One quick story. I lived in Cleveland for a few years. I moved there in 1977. And when I got there, the Cavaliers, the basketball team, was doing very badly. The stadium was in a suburb of Cleveland, about an hour away. Don't ask me why. And most of the people around that suburb were white. A guy named Ted Stepien vowed to buy the Cavaliers. And he said, when I buy them, I'm going to make sure there are more white starting players because I believe the team is not performing well in the box office because white people want to watch white people play basketball. He bought the team, and he did just that, Gareth. 4 of the 5 starting players were white. The team drew fewer players, fewer fans than they did the year before. They lost more games. Surprise, surprise. White people didn't like watching white people lose any more than they like watching black people lose. And because he traded away the top picks of his team 2 years in a row, the NBA took the team away from him, implemented a rule called the Stepien rule so that no owner going forward could ever trade back-to-back number 1 picks. That's what happened when you practice discrimination in the marketplace. People will punish you. White people don't want to go to a corporation, patronize a corporation if they feel that that corporation is systemically racist. What's the upside in being perceived as a racist organization, a racist for-profit company in America? There's no upside.
But the demand for racism seems to outstrip the supply in so many ways, which is why organizations like Black Lives Matter and like so many others, including obviously college campuses, the academic world, and Democrat politicians, seem to hop on to any issue they think will gain them easy points with Black people. This, again, can be seen, if you zoom out a little bit, as being tremendously patronizing. And it must grate you and so many other independent thinkers in the Black community or people who are just trying to live their lives, that they're being treated as numbers in a huge group rather than as individuals.
Well, you're right about the demand for racism outstripping the supply. The big one was, again, the death of George Floyd. As I said before, there's zero evidence that whatever Derek Chauvin did had to do with George Floyd's race. Yet we had 4 months of protests in the streets where at least 25 people were killed, 2,000 officers wounded, and about $2 billion in damage. We had that ridiculous Jussie Smollett story where he claimed that a bunch of two MAGA wearing guys in Chicago jumped him at 2 o'clock in the morning as he was coming back from Subway with his tuna fish footlong. We've had the story of Bubba Wallace, who allegedly had a noose in his garage. Turned out it was just a pull rope, not a noose. And there's a book by a guy named Wilfred Riley that documented over 500 fake hate crimes over the last several years, pushed by Black people, bought by the media, because the media has invested itself in this bogus narrative that racism remains a major problem in America. The fact that when there is an incident of racism, for example, recently there's an amusement park called Sesame Place in Philadelphia, and there's a Muppet character named Rosita who appeared to be ignoring the Black kids while high-fiving the white kids. I'm not sure whether or not that was done intentionally. I have no idea, but a number of people that went to that park over the years after the story became big, produced video that seemed to suggest these characters were in fact ignoring Black kids in favor of white kids. What happened? Rosetta has now been fired. The Sesame Place has apologized. They're now conducting an outreach in order to hire more Black people, because in the marketplace, they are being punished. There's a Rosetta restaurant that has now been shut down because of all of this. There's no upside in practicing discrimination. There's a huge downside, however, in practicing discrimination. So it's just not true. Again, individuals, hell, 8% of Americans, Gareth, believe Elvis is still alive. 6% believe you send him a letter, he'll get it. So you have to write off about 30 million Americans from the get-go. I don't know what to say about that.
Well, I'm also very aware of the fact that you and I are sitting here and we've talked for 26 minutes about race and racism. And there's so much more I want to get into with you. But the final word on this really is, I suppose, down to American politics and how you see it unfolding in the future, because we're going to move on to some other things, which I'm sure that you have plenty to say about. But where do you think things are going to go? You mentioned earlier that the Black vote seems to be moving, albeit incrementally. We know the Hispanic vote in America moving very much more dramatically at the moment. Right. Where do you think that the average Black voter in 20 years, who might look back on this conversation and go, oh, wow, these guys were either completely wrong or they were right. Let's give them a reason to say these guys were right. And let's put your predictive powers to play. I think America could probably do with a lot more quality candidates, white, Black, Democrat, and Republican. But what do you think the votes are going to turn out to be in the next few years?
I think if Black people stop focusing on nonsense, stop focusing on things like critical race theory, stop buying the bull that's being pushed by people like Barack Obama and Al Sharpton, Black people will be just fine. Let me give you one example. 2007, during the primary, when Barack Obama on the Democratic side was competing against Hillary, and on the Republican side, you had John McCain competing against Mitt Romney. Gallup asked America, what percentage of you would not vote for a Black person? 2007, 5% said they would never vote for a Black person. What percentage would never vote for a female, referring to Hillary? 11% said they would never vote for a female. What percentage of you would never vote for a Mormon, referring to Mitt Romney? 24% said they would never vote for a Mormon. What percentage of you would vote for somebody who'd be as old as John McCain would be if he became president? At the time, he would have been 72 years old. Now that seems young, but back then that seemed old. 42% said they would not vote for somebody who would be as old as John McCain. So Barack Obama had a lower threshold than these three more popular white politicians. That was 2007. So the future in America
by those numbers, we could say that that perhaps sexism is twice the problem racism is, and ageism may be the biggest problem of all.
And hostility to being a Mormon might be a bigger problem than that. Right. My point is that,
or being an atheist, we know that that's an unpopular position in America.
Absolutely. All I'm saying is Barack Obama, as a Black person, had a lower barrier than these three more popular, more experienced white politicians. So knock it off. In this business about Donald Trump sending a racist dog whistle in order to get elected, think about this. There were 700 counties that both voted for Obama 2008, 2012, 700. In 2016, 200 of those 700 switched over to Donald Trump. What were they, bitten by racist radioactive spider from 2012 to 2016. And the city that most voted for Donald Trump, of over 100,000, was Abilene, Texas in 2016. Around 85% of people in that town voted for Donald Trump. Guess which town promptly then voted for its first black mayor in 138 years? You got it, Abilene, Texas. Now, how is it that Donald Trump sent a racist dog whistle to get white people to vote for him, and the same racist white people then voted for a black mayor to run their city? It's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. And all you're doing is telling people you're eternal victims if you're black, and telling white people you're eternal oppressors. And it's just an affront to common sense and an affront to the reality of what's going on in America right now.
Well, a lot of what you're saying is an affront to people who don't believe in common sense, or who certainly act as if they don't believe it. And you receive a lot of heat for what you say in the media, what you say on your own shows, what you've said in your documentary, Uncle Tom. I believe there's another one you mentioned coming out soon. And you've already told us that you've received the epithet of being the black face of white supremacy, which is, I mean, it's insulting on a level that that very few people could ever really get to grips with. It strikes me as slightly annoying, and I'm trying to imagine what it's like to be Larry Elder for 5 minutes. When you live in a state like California, which is one of the more liberal states in America, it's a blue state. You've got a governor who you also tried to eject from his position not so long ago. You've made a mark in the entertainment business. You've been around a long time, and people think it's okay to throw these labels at you. How do you deal with this stuff on a daily basis? How does it make you feel when you wonder whether or not other black people are looking at you going, oh, he's that guy who's he's with the Republicans, or he's a sellout, or whatever else they call you?
Well, I feel sorry for them, because it shows me that you have drunk the Kool-Aid. The left has convinced you not only that America remains a systemically racist country, but that somebody black like Larry Elder comes along and says it's not true. I become the enemy. That's how successful they've been in indoctrinating black people. By the way, the person that called me the black face of white supremacy, her initials are Erica D. Smith. Oops. I invited her on my radio show after the campaign was over to explain why it is I'm the black face of white supremacy, and she refused to come on because she didn't have enough guts to defend her position. By the way, we mentioned Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, Louis Farrakhan. Over the 30 years I was on radio, Gareth, I invited all of them on, an average of maybe 50 times over the course of my career. Not a single one would come on the radio. Now, if I am an enemy of black people, the black face of white supremacy, it seems to me I would have an obligation, if I were Jesse Jackson or Al Sharpton or Louis Farrakhan, to come on my show and put me in my place, but none of them has, because, well, William F. Buckley once said, after 30 years of having a program on PBS, was asked, why is it that Robert Kennedy, who was a longtime senator and AG under John Kennedy, never came on your program? And he said, and I'm quoting, why does a baloney avoid the grinder?
Larry, let's talk about something that's happened recently, which everybody in the world is kind of perplexed by, and it must have confused a lot of Americans too. President Trump, who's been out of office for more than a year and a half now, isn't really in the headlines as much. He's certainly not on social media because he's been banned by Twitter. Just the other day, the FBI raided his house at Mar-a-Lago. They tell us that this is because he's concealing top secret documents which have to do with the nuclear program, which he's not allowed to be in possession of. All of this is bound to do two things. First of all, raise a lot of eyebrows, both on the Democrat and Republican side. And there were interesting tweets from people as diverse as who was the guy who I saw tweeting about this? One of the Congress people was saying on the Democrat side that this is probably going to do more damage to the FBI's kind of PR and their reputation and the institutional reputation of so many government agencies, which people believe are already captured. That's a word that I'm sad to say South Africa has, thanks to our state capture by our former president. It's a word that we've contributed to the lexicon. But there are so many things going on underground here in terms of the political machinations. And this is the kind of environment that's rife for conspiracy theory. So you're a man whose insight into these things I respect. You've watched the news, you've participated in the news, you know some of these people. What actually is happening here? Is this a dirty trick, or is it part of some conspiracy to propel Donald Trump to the top and to cut out people like, I don't know, DeSantis or someone else?
Well, that's a broad question. Let me just say this first. Both sides in America are dug in. The people that support Donald Trump are going to support him pretty much no matter what the FBI turns up regarding their search of Mar-a-Lago. And people that hate Donald Trump's guts are always going to hate his gut no matter what happens. Here's what bothers me. What bothers me are the double standards, what I call a two-tiered system of justice. Let's assume, for example, that this raid on Mar-a-Lago was valid, that Donald Trump had taken documents he wasn't supposed to take, and they couldn't figure out some sort of way of negotiating the return of those documents, and therefore the FBI had to do what they had to do. There are lots of examples where the FBI should have used the same tactics on the Democratic side, but they chose not to. Most notably, Hillary Clinton. She had an unsecured server in her basement on which she sent and received classified information. She lied about it and said she didn't. And then she said, well, I didn't send or receive information that was stamped classified. She lied about that. She did send or receive information that was stamped classified. That was an apparent violation of the Espionage Act, but the FBI had a big presentation, outlined all the things that Hillary did. At the last minute said, but she lacked the intent, therefore we're not going to prosecute her. Well, if you read the Espionage Act and the part that she allegedly violated, it doesn't require intent, yet she skated. There's the Attorney General under Barack Obama named Eric Holder. Eric Holder was subpoenaed to turn over documents regarding a program called Fast and Furious. It was a gun walking program where the government, for reasons that still puzzle me, allowed illegal guns to flow to our southern border, presumably in order to catch cartels buying them. But the guns ended up in the hands of people on both sides of the border. One of them was used to kill a U.S. Border Patrol agent. So Congress subpoenaed records from Eric Holder about this program called Fast and Furious. Eric Holder did not turn over the documents, became the first sitting AG to be found in criminal contempt of Congress. The Republicans took him to court, and ultimately a Obama judge allowed them to negotiate back and forth for almost 5 years. After 5 years, finally, we think all the documents were turned over. I say we think because Jason Chavis, who was then in the House, he's now a Fox News pundit, does not believe all the documents were turned over. Under Bill Clinton, there was a national security guy named Sandy Berger. They were doing an investigation about 9/11, about whether or not the Bill Clinton administration should have done things, could have done things in order to prevent 9/11 from happening. So Sandy Berger goes to the National Archive to prepare for his testimony, and literally, Gareth, takes documents out of the National Archives, stuffs them in his pants, and destroys them. He was given a slap on the wrist. His security clearance was taken away for about 3 years. He had to pay a fine, and that's about all that happened to him. There's a woman named Lois Lerner, who was the head of the IRS tax-exempt section. She was denying the applications of conservative charities for tax-exempt purposes for their donors. She was subpoenaed. She took the fifth. She was allowed to retire with her pension and lives in a nice suburban home in Washington, D.C. So these examples are examples that people like myself raise to say, why isn't the standard the same? And it does not appear the standard is the same. And one more big point. What Donald Trump is being accused of is pushing the so-called big lie about 2020. He claims the election was stolen. Whether you feel that way or not, Hillary has said the same thing about 2016 for the entirety of President Trump's presidency. She referred to him as quote unquote illegitimate, and she called the 2016 election stolen, to the point where 66% of Democrats believe, according to a YouGov poll, that the Russians, quote, changed vote tallies, close quote, to elect Donald Trump. Now, this was investigated 2016, a 1,000-page report by the Senate, and they made two major conclusions. Number one, the Russians tried to change vote tallies, no question about it, but they failed to change a single one. Yet again, 66% of Democrats believe the Russians changed vote tallies. Second finding, we don't know whether or not the Russian interference altered public opinion or altered the outcome of the election. We'd have to have a world where there was interference and one where there wasn't to tell. We don't know. Yet 78% of Democrats, according to Gallup, believe the Russian interference, quote, altered the outcome of the election, close quote, in favor of Trump. In other words, my long way of saying this, a greater percentage of Democrats believe 2016 was stolen than Republicans who feel the same way about 2020. Yet Hillary's social media platforms were never shut down. She's on Twitter, she's on IG, she's on Facebook. Donald Trump is on none of them because of pushing the so-called big lie. Again, the double standard is what fries a lot of people, including me.
So there are a lot of things going on here, and I can't help thinking that no matter what happens in these midterm elections, people are saying that the Republicans are going to make a sweep of it. Other people are saying, well, you know, the social media platforms, the media, the mainstream media are all gearing up to help the Democrats to withstand any kind of counter reaction. But as you've pointed out already, and you said it just now, that things are increasingly becoming polarized. And you do hear some people, obviously these are extremists, but talking about how there's like a cold civil war going on between the right and the left in America. And just like in any country, there's the majority of people in the middle who are not pulled to either extreme, who actually listen to what's being said. They watch what's being done. They feel how it feels when their own pocket becomes lighter. They know what it means when they go to the gas station and they try to fill up and it costs them a lot more money. They know what it's like to find jobs or not find jobs and to be paid a decent salary. And those people are not really extreme right or left wing people. So the average American has probably got the kind of opinions that you couldn't call left or right, but they're being pulled in one direction or the other by, you know, the wheel of fortune that keeps on turning. And we keep hearing that, you know, Joe Biden has managed the economy very, very badly. He's created all this inflation. We also hear that the left has maybe taken it too far when it comes to gender and race politics. Do you believe that those are the factors that will determine the votes in this upcoming election? And how do you think people, even in a state like yours, will vote?
Well, here's the problem. The media are dominated by the left. They're dominated by people who can't stand Donald Trump. So if you're just somebody trying to put food on the table, trying to make sure your kids get to and from school safely, you're still going to ingest news from CNN, ABC, NBC, MSNBC, whether you want to or not. And the problem is they are so blatantly biased. The Washington Post and New York Times are the two most important newspapers in America. The Washington Post has never, ever endorsed a Republican for president. I repeat, never endorsed a Republican for president. The New York Times has not endorsed one since 1956. And there was a poll, NBC poll, in 2016 when Donald Trump was running, and likely voters were asked, what is the number one reason you dislike Donald Trump? And the number one reason, Gareth, they gave is that Donald Trump, quote, mocked a disabled reporter, close quote. He did no such thing. The reporter in question is named Serge Kovaleski. He worked for one of the major newspapers. And Donald Trump publicly said when the towers fell on 9/11, there were people, Muslims, that were celebrating the fall. And of course, because Donald Trump is Donald Trump, everything he says is fact-checked by the media. And they accused him of lying. So Donald Trump produced an article written by this reporter who said just that there were people cheering the fall of the wall. They went to that guy and they asked him about the story, and then he began to backpedal. He said, well, I'm not sure it was that many. I'm not sure it was as many as Donald Trump says. And then in a speech, Donald Trump mocked him. He said, they went to the guy and he goes, oh, I'm not sure. I don't remember. And began waving his hands like this. Now, this reporter does have a disability. I forget the word for it, some long word. He doesn't go like this. His arm is atrophied. He holds it like this, and he speaks very calmly. And there's a website that showed Donald Trump using that gesture to mock himself, to mock an able-bodied general, to mock other people. He's used that gesture for years. But much of the country is convinced that Donald Trump mocked a disabled reporter. So this is the kind of crap that was put out. It was also put out that Donald Trump said there were good Nazis and bad Nazis regarding Charlottesville. He said no such thing. He was talking about there are good people and bad people on both sides of the issue whether or not there should be a Confederate monument in the public square. But that's also been misinterpreted. So much of what you're hearing about Republicans, about Donald Trump, about conservatism is simply distorted, twisted, if not outright lied about. And that's why so many people in this country, in my opinion, are ill-informed.
You know, there's so much of this that is reminiscent of things that we've discussed in South Africa for such a long time. And there are now obviously many parallels between America and South Africa, because we've both got, you know, these histories of colonialism. We've certainly got the histories of segregation. In South Africa, it was law for a much longer time in terms of our country's age. But obviously, I can't help thinking when I hear about these kinds of stories that it seems that religion, or the absence of religion, is a major factor in the way people are behaving politically. And I know you said earlier that conservatives believe in family, in working hard, and in God. And I wonder if you have any comments on what's happened to people who've either given up on religion, given up on work, or given up on family, and whether or not those kinds of things would push you in a certain direction politically.
I think they do. I think if you give up on religion, you give up on the notion of right and wrong, of good and evil, of family, of hard work, of thrift, of personal responsibility. And when you give up on education, you are easily misled and manipulated. Let me give you another example. This business about systemic racism. If you ask majority of Black people whether or not systemic racism exists, I suspect a majority of them would say yes. But look at what's going on. Virtually every major city in America has or has had a Black mayor. We've had Black senators, Black governors. There was a high-profile police death in Baltimore in 2016, I believe it was. A man named Freddie Gray was in a police van, Black man, and he ended up being killed in the van, probably because he wasn't strapped down and his head hit the van as they were making a sharp turn. He broke his neck and died. And all of a sudden, Baltimore Police Department is now systemically racist. Let's back up. At the time, the mayor of Baltimore was Black. The number 1 and number 2 people running the police department were Black. All of city council, Democrat, majority Black. There were 6 officers who were tried, 3 of them Black. 2 of the officers tried their case before a Black judge who found them, by the way, not guilty. The state attorney who brought the charges against the 6 Black cops was Black. The United States attorney at the time, Loretta Lynch, was Black. The president of the United States was Black. And I'm reminded of a joke that a comedian named Wanda Sykes once said. She said, "How are you going to complain about the man when you are the man?" So Blacks are running the system top to bottom in Baltimore. Yet when this happened, a bunch of people hit the streets and yelled and screamed about systemic racism. It just flies in the face of what's going on in the real world.
A lot of people are interested in your own political ambitions. You've now created all of this incredible content over your long and distinguished career. You have stood up for, in your case, what you believe is the truth and what you've proven over and over again. And you can cite numbers and you can cite statistics, you can cite history, and you can cite your own experience. Of course, the lived experience is all that matters to the left, but all of those things you could be objective about too. But what next? I mean, Larry, you've got the ability to speak clearly about things. People must be talking to you, trying to get you to take up political office. You've played a role not only as a journalist and a talk show host, but also as an activist in some cases. As I mentioned earlier, you were at the forefront of the campaign to have Gavin Newsom recalled, the governor of California. That didn't happen in the end, but it was a close-run thing.
Well, it was. I got, as you know, it was a 2-step deal. The first part is 50% plus 1 had to vote to recall Gavin Newsom. That didn't happen. Had he been recalled, whoever got the greatest number of votes on the replacement side would have become governor. There were 45 candidates on the replacement side. I got 3.5 million votes. That's pretty much more than all of the other 45 combined. We got into the race with 7.5 weeks left. We raised $22 million, more than all of the major Republican rivals on the replacement side combined. California has 58 counties, and we carried 57 of 58. The only one we didn't carry was San Francisco, and I lost that by 149 votes and didn't spend 1 minute campaigning there or 1 dime on TV or radio ads. So by any stretch, it was an extraordinary campaign, 150,000 individual donors. Half of them came from outside of California. And I was asked all over the state, and as I've gone around the country, what's next? Why don't you run for president? And I'm giving it very serious thought. I have a political action committee. It's called elderforamerica.com. But it was set up to help Republicans take back the House, take back the Senate, campaign in favor of school choice, campaign to get rid of these soft on crime DAs, campaign to get rid of critical race theory, and for initiatives to support strong families. But after that, I'm giving strong consideration to considering running for president. I'm not going to attack Donald Trump, not going to attack Ron DeSantis, who may get in the race, or Mike Pompeo, who may get in the race. I have my own things I want to talk about, most notably what government has done to destroy the family, and that we have to get back to entrepreneurship and get back to God and lose these ridiculous soft on crime DAs that are causing Black people to be killed in extraordinary historic numbers.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the recall of so many of these DAs. It just happened in San Francisco, right? There was a soft on crime DA there who was taken out by the community. They eventually decided to recall the guy.
His name is Chesa Boudin, and he received support from Governor Gavin Newsom. He was recalled with over 60% of the vote in San Francisco. Unfortunately, there was a recall effort to recall the LA County DA, George Gascon, who got his first job from Gavin Newsom, but there weren't enough valid signatures filed. So he's not going to face a recall election come November, as some of us had hoped for and as some of us had predicted.
Maybe if they'd had mail-in votes, it would have worked a bit better. And of course, the other thing that's going on is that school boards all over the country are being reviewed by parents, by families who are concerned about the way that their kids are being raised and the things their kids are being taught at school. And of course, this is where you've got to give it to the left. They kind of saw education as being primary, and they took over in many ways. The public school education of so many Americans. It's going to be very difficult to unseat them from that.
Well, consider this. 85% of Black eighth graders, according to national tests, 85% are neither math nor reading proficient. That means 85% of Black eighth graders are functionally illiterate in America. And we're spending more money than ever on education. It's not about the money. It's all about the quality of education, the fact that we don't have school choice. And look at this. Around 10% of American families have their kids in private school. Roughly 6% of Black families do. 44% of Philadelphia government school teachers with school-age kids put their own kids in private school. 39% of Chicago government school teachers put their own kids in private school. I have said it's the equivalent of opening up a restaurant, putting up a big sign saying, "Come on in, eat the food." We sure won't.
Well, the Republicans are looking like they're in a very favorable position, both for the midterms that are coming up and also for the presidential election, which will be in another 2.5 years from now. But what do you think of the possible entry into the game by Michelle Obama? People are saying that she could be the savior candidate for the Dems.
Not going to happen. Not going to happen because Kamala Harris wants to be president. And the only way she leaves is she says, "I want to go. I'm not competent. I'm out of here." Because, as I said, blacks are the most loyal part of the Democratic Party. Black females are even more loyal. There's zero evidence that Michelle Obama wants to do it. She's never said she wants to do it. I don't believe she has a temperament to be a politician. I think she's easily angered. This is the one who said, "For the first time in my life, I'm proud of America." She often complained about being in the fishbowl as being the first lady. She doesn't like politics, and the only way you can replace Kamala Harris is replace her with another Black female, and the only likely one would be Michelle Obama. She's not going to do it.
Well, Larry, if you're going to be president one day, I think it'll shake everybody up. It'll certainly get some things right, and I think you'll be able to make an enormous difference. But I wish you the best of luck. It's been great to talk to you again. I hope that we'll continue to touch base over the next few years and keep an eye on your political career, as well as the incredible contribution that you make to understanding what's going on in this society around us. And obviously, we didn't get a chance to talk about Russia and the Ukraine. We didn't get a chance to talk about a whole bunch of things, which we could at another stage. But I know you're a busy man, and I really appreciate your time.
Just tell everybody they can watch Uncle Tom 1 for free by going to uncletom.com. They can pre-order Uncle Tom 2 by going to uncletom.com. And it comes out on August 26th. It'll be streamed on salemnow.com.
Fantastic. Larry, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.